What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be round one of the upgrades I'm doing to my Springfield Echelon. If you haven't seen the other videos I've done on this, I'll link them down below so you guys can go check those out. But I'm going to show you the new parts I got for this thing and then we're going to throw them on, so let's jump into it. In my opinion, this is one of the best out-of-the-box striker-fired handguns you can buy. I've been really impressed with this thing, how it shoots, how it handles, how the trigger feels, the modularity of it, all that stuff. This is a really great platform to start a build on. We'll go over a few features of the gun once we jump over to the bench, but I'm going to show you some of these parts I got really quick. So first up is a new Powder River Precision trigger. They just barely came out with this probably a couple weeks ago. I hit them up about getting one. They were cool enough to send this out for me to try out. So we're going to throw that in there. We'll do a little bit of testing before we swap that out, do the trigger pull tests and stuff before and after. But the shape of this trigger shoe is a little bit different. It's kind of a hybrid flat face trigger with a little kick out at the bottom, so it kind of holds your finger there. It's made out of 6061 anodized aluminum. They do offer a few different color options for that safety blade in the middle of the trigger. It also reduces the pre-travel, the over-travel, the reset, reduces all that stuff and drops the weight just a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes the dynamic of this gun. I also got a new Magwell and base pads for this thing. If you haven't seen Patriot CNC, he makes these awesome Magwells for the Echelon. He has a couple different types. This one right here is the tactical. It has the relief cuts so you can get a grip on that magazine base plate. This one right here is called the Performance. It's pretty much the same Magwell without the cutouts for gripping that magazine to rip it out. And then he also has one that you can use with your stock base pads that come on the magazines. With these two, you have to have his base pads or extensions to work with them, unless you're going to modify your factory magazine base pads. But I'll show you this stuff a little bit closer up once we jump over to the bench. Another thing I'm going to throw on this is a Trijicon RMR. I had one of these here in my gun room, and I figured I'd throw it on here, try it out. If you guys don't know, the Echelon has a very modular optics mounting system. You can mount a bunch of different optics. I think there's 30 something different optics you can mount on this without an adapter plate, which is awesome. So I'm going to try that out and see how that works. And then I also got a weapon light for this. I got a Holosun PID I'm going to throw on this. I really like these weapon lights. Now I do have one other Powder River Precision trigger. I put it in my XDM Elite 10mm, and with this gun, if you didn't see the video I did on this, the factory trigger was having kind of a double reset. You would shoot and then you'd let your finger off a little bit, there would be a click, and you'd pull that trigger again, it wouldn't fire. I'd have to let off a little bit more and get another click. So there was like 2 clicks on the reset, and that drove me nuts when I was at the range. I noticed it here while I was working on it and toying around with it. Everybody told me it doesn't do that when you live fire it. That's just a product of slowly racking the slide. Well, it did it all the time, whether I was here in my gun room or at the range shooting this thing. So it drove me nuts. So I put one of Powder River Precision's triggers in this, and it has been awesome. It totally changed the feel of this gun, and it got rid of my double reset. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll link it below so you guys can watch that also. But let's jump over to the bench, take a little bit closer look at this stuff, and get this stuff thrown on the Echelon. Let's take a little closer look at some of these parts before we get them thrown on. Now this is that Powder River Precision trigger kit. It comes with a new trigger shoe, a new sear spring, a new sear safety spring, a trigger return spring, and a new striker spring. Like I mentioned, it reduces the trigger take up by about 60%, total trigger travel like 46%, and the reset around 20%. With all that, it drops the trigger pull weight to around 3.5 pounds, so it'll be interesting to see once we get that installed, if it drops to that or where it hits and what the difference is from the factory trigger. Like I mentioned, we are going to do a trigger pull test before and after. Once I get going, I'll kind of show the parts side by side so we can compare as I swap this thing out. These are the Magwells from Patriot CNC that he sent me. This one is the Performance Magwell, so it doesn't have those cutouts on the side for stripping magazines. And then this one is the Tactical Magwell for stripping those magazines out. And then he also has a couple different options as far as base pads go. This is just a +0, doesn't add any rounds. And then this one is a +3 or 4, I don't remember, but it'll replace your factory magazine base pads, and that shouldn't be too big of a deal. But these things look like they're quality. He CNCs them all in-house and gets them anodized. He also does a bunch of other CNC work, slide work, porting, slide cuts, optic cuts, whatever you need. He does all that stuff. And to be honest, out of the Echelon Magwells that I've seen out there, these are some of the best looking. A lot of them you can still see this big gap that's on the back of the grip right here, which I didn't like. That's honestly one of the reasons I hadn't ordered any yet. But once we get these installed, I'll show you. This covers that up and you don't have that big gap there looking like an unfinished product. And then this is that Holosun weapon light. This is the PID HC. These are extremely bright. They mount on anything with a pick rail. It comes with a bunch of different keyways for whatever gun you got, and I haven't had any problems with this one yet. And then we're going with the trusty Trijicon RMR. This one's the 6 MOA dot. I had this on another gun, and I'm just going to throw it on this one and see how that optics mounting system works. And then, like with all my videos, I'll have a link in the description that takes you to my website where you guys can check this stuff out, get more information. I don't sell anything over there, it's just information only. So if you guys want more info for any of this stuff or any of the tools and stuff that you see me using, make sure you hit that link in the description and go over there and check it out. I'm going to move some of this stuff to the side really quick, and we'll do a trigger pull test on this gun before we get started. This is empty. And I'm just going to use my Lyman digital trigger pull gauge. We'll do like a 3-pull average. .99. That one's 4 pounds, 11.7. And that one's 4 pounds, 11 ounces. So that averages out to 4 pounds, 10.8 ounces. So a little over 4.5 pound trigger from the factory, which isn't bad in its own right. So I'm gonna get going installing some of this stuff. YouTube doesn't like me showing you guys how to install stuff like this, so I'm gonna throw you on time lapse. We're gonna get some of this stuff installed. I'll stop here and there and show you differences in certain things, but let's get going on this. I got that cog out, got the trigger kind of disassembled and the trigger shoe off, so I wanted to show you the difference in the trigger shoe. This one is the factory trigger shoe, and this is the Powder River Precision trigger shoe. You'll notice that this factory trigger has one pin that holds this safety blade in, as well as holds it to that trigger bar, where Powder River Precision's has a pin just for that trigger safety, and then it has a separate pin to hold it to the trigger bar. You can see the shape difference. This one's more flat all the way down with just a little kick out at the bottom. This one has kind of 3 different angles on it, and this one's just polymer plastic, and this one's made out of aluminum. Alright guys, got that trigger installed. That doesn't look bad at all. I like the look of that shoe. I chose the black on black. They do have different color safety blades if you want a different color. I just chose to go with black. So let's check this thing out. So there's the take up. Drastically shortened it. Crisp break. Here's the reset. Right there. Crisp break. You always want to make sure to function check it after you do something like this. And by all means, if you guys aren't comfortable taking on a project like this, have a competent gunsmith do it. It's not worth the hassle trying to put a gun back together if you don't know how it works and how things go. So my suggestion is take it to a gunsmith if you guys need help doing something like this. But for me personally, this isn't a bad project. There's plenty of resources out there. I'll even link Powder River Precision's YouTube page down below so you guys can go check out some of the videos they have. They do have a video on this, so if that's something you guys want to check out, I suggest doing that if you're thinking about getting one of these. But that drastically shortened the take up and the over travel. Reset's pretty short too. In his video, he has some tape here and shows before and after the pre-travel and the break and the reset and stuff like that. So you can see the difference before and after. But let's do a trigger pull test on this real quick. £3 pounds, 12 ounces. £3 pounds, 15. £3 pounds, 13. So that averages 3 pounds, 13.6 ounces. So that is about a pound difference from what it was pulling at from the factory. Now with that out of the way, I'm going to get this other stuff thrown on real quick. Before I get too far putting this Trijicon on, I wanted to show you guys this optic system. So this is Springfield's optic system. It has a bunch of different holes for different optics, and then it has these pins up front, and this gun comes with all the different pins you'll need to put different optics on. So if you have a RMR, the pins come already pre-installed. If you have a different brand of optic that's not the RMR footprint, they have different pins you can put in here that offsets it, and it has the bolt holes already in there. So it's a pretty slick system for these optics that bolt right to the slide. Now if you're doing something like a 509T or something like that, or one of those big enclosed optics, you will probably have to get a plate for that, because they're kind of a clamp style mount that you mount the plate and then it clamps to the plate. So this is beneficial for optics that direct mount. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing installed. So that optic went on pretty slick. You do want to make sure you blue Loctite it and torque it down to the proper specs. I just have this little fat wrench, this inch-pound wrench that I use all the time, so it wouldn't be a bad idea for you guys to pick one of these up. Like I said, I'll have all these tools over at the parts list. If you guys want to follow that link in the description, you can go check out anything that I'm using or any of the tools that I'm using. Now you want to make sure you have the right screws. Do not try and use these little screws that come with the cover plate. Those aren't long enough. So you'll have to get the right screws for whatever optic you're putting on. But that turned out pretty good on there. So I'm going to throw these Magwells on. I'm going to throw on the Performance Magwell. These aren't hard to put on, and it comes with the screws that you're going to need. I'll just put it in, kind of squeeze it, pop it on there, make sure it's seated all the way. And then this comes with 3 different length screws. I'm guessing that depends on which back strap you're using. One's short, one's medium, one's long. So I'll just throw this on there with what back strap I have. Now I'll throw this Holosun weapon light on. And then I'm going to throw on the +4 and the +0 base pads on the 2 magazines that I got. Got everything installed that I wanted to. Let's jump back up off the bench and take a closer look at all this stuff and go over kind of what I learned and what I like, what I don't like. All right, so that wasn't a bad evening project. I got all that stuff installed. The RMR, the Powder River Precision Trigger, that Holosun weapon light, and the Magwell and the extensions and the base pad. So this thing turned out pretty good. Here's how that trigger looks. There's the take up, break. Nice short reset, break. You do want to make sure to safety check everything when you're doing something like this. Make sure everything works how it's supposed to work so you don't run into any problems down the line. And then with that red dot, you want to make sure you have the right pins for whatever red dot you're putting on. Like I mentioned earlier, this is one of the best looking Magwells that's out there right now for the Echelon because it covers up that gap on the back. This thing doesn't have a gap, it covers it up all the way. I think that makes the gun look finished. With a couple other Magwells I've seen, there's that big gap in the back and it just looks unfinished. It looks like they didn't take the time to design a product that fits the gun that you're putting it on. So I really like these Magwells. That thing turned out pretty good, I think. This is the +0 base pad. It just replaces that factory plastic one. It fits just fine. This is the +3 or +4, I don't remember exactly what it is. The extension, it fits perfectly. That totally changes this gun. It looks really good with that Echelon mounting system for the red dots. That thing does co-witness, which is awesome. You don't need to buy taller sights. And I'm really excited to get this thing out shooting. The thing that took me the longest is obviously putting that trigger in. That was a little bit of a process. It wasn't bad, but like I mentioned, if you guys aren't confident or comfortable, make sure you get the right people to do it. It's worth the extra money paying a gunsmith to do it if that's a project you guys don't think you can take on. But for me, it wasn't bad. I got it installed, but I do have one complaint with the trigger. So overall, the trigger feels awesome. I love how the travel changed. The take up is very minimal. The brake is awesome. We lost about a pound, as you guys saw in that trigger pull test, but my complaint comes with the reset. You can barely hear that reset. You can't feel it whatsoever in your finger. That's what took me a while with this thing. I went back and forth. I changed that trigger return spring back to the factory one and then back to this one. Lubed everything up, double checked, make sure I had everything installed correctly. That's one thing that I really like, is an audible reset that you can feel in your finger. I've had a couple guns where I didn't have that. You don't have the audible reset, or that you can feel it in your trigger finger, so you're unsure whether it's reset or not. Could you guys tell that reset? If I wasn't here in a quiet room, I wouldn't be able to tell that reset. So I'm not sure what the deal is, because when I changed it back to the factory trigger return spring, it didn't change it a whole lot. It reset a little quicker, but that all depends on how much pressure you have with your finger also. So I may reach out to Powder River Precision, ask them a few questions, see what they think, if that's normal, if that's what they're experiencing. If I have any updates on that, I'll make sure I put it in the next video I do on the Echelon, or I'll put it in the comments down below to let you guys know what I found out. Here's a shot of that underside of that Magwell. You can see that's nice and flared, nice and smooth right into the grip of that gun. Magazine slides right in. I've been playing with this for the last 20 minutes or so. I haven't had one hang up or anything like that. So that's how the Echelon turned out after the first round of upgrades. I think it looks totally different. I'll throw up a before and after picture so you guys can see the difference. But that totally changed this gun. I'm excited to get this thing to the range, and that's the next thing I'm gonna do, get this thing to the range, make sure everything works right, make sure the trigger functions right, make sure these magazines and the Magwell function right, that the slide locks open, all that stuff. So that might be my next video, is hitting the range with this thing. And then I've got a couple other upgrades I think I'm gonna do to this. So make sure you're subscribed so you can see those videos when I do those. Like I mentioned, I'll have that link in the description that takes you to my website, where you can find all the information you need for anything that I use today, any of the tools, anything like that. It's information only, I don't sell anything. So if you guys want more info on that stuff, go check that out. And as always, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, and we'll check you guys on the next one.